No, when I was mid-20s, I got diagnosed with depression and anxiety on medication for a long time. And I remember distinctly at the time, people kind of talking about, oh, you diagnosed it. I used to talk about it as a diagnosis. And where I kind of came to terms with it, maybe this is a maturity thing over the next few years after that, was I don't want it to be seen as a medical diagnosis. I want to it's just part of me. And when I talk about a diagnosis, I'm like, don't make it medical. Make it, that's me. That's my being. And it's part of me. And I accept that. It's not, you've got stuff which treats it and stuff which makes it perhaps less, ugly sometimes. But I personally would rather not see it as a medical thing. I'd rather just see it as that's just who I am, and I just go with it.
That's interesting because I think I would personally take the opposite. I also was diagnosed with depression and anxiety in my 20s, which is where I started my therapy journey. I did that, so I chose therapy rather than drugs, and I don't like that my anxiety is part of my personality. I actually, because I believe it is something that I am afflicted with and I know goes away. So rather than saying it is core to who I am, I'm saying it's something that I have to live with. Yeah. But it's not something that I want as part of me. It may well be part of me.
It's just different perspectives.
It's really interesting actually that.
So I remember having, I don't know, like an anxiety, like a panic attack. I don't know what age I would have been. It's like late 20s. I can't remember the reason behind it. But I'd been on medication, come off the medication. It just wasn't for me. I've been to counselling and learned about thoughts, feelings, behaviours. I remember the lady saying,
think, feel, do, baby.
Yeah, you got to change one of these things and that'll break the cycle.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was having this panic attack, being able to fairly rationalise it and say, okay, I know what's happening. And therefore, I know what I need to do to fix it. And I'd think about something or try to do something different. And then for me, that calms me down. It kind of makes me think, that's just Chris being Chris. Like, that's okay.
I get you.
This isn't something which is out of your control. This is something that you know what it is. You know it's in you. You know it's part of you, and you know you can deal with it. That's how I chose to look at it.
Oh, I see it more as a racist uncle. Okay. That like I'm gonna have to deal with for a very, very, very long time, and I can kind of just pretend isn't there until he's there, and then when he's there, you're like, oh, okay. That's
it's different. Maybe that's the name of the podcast. There.
The racist.
The racist.
So, for anyone who's new here, my name's Ted.
And I'm Chris.
And this is the Human Up podcast, where we're talking about lots of different things, actually, around culture and society and psychology and all this sort of stuff, but through the lens of being a man.
Being a man. Not just a man, but a modern man. A modern man 2024, right? How different is man in this year than it was in previous years? And all the stuff that goes around it is different, right? There's so many different things that I think we're scrutinised on as men. And here we are, just Ted and Chris pulling it apart and giving some words of wisdom.
And one of the things we were talking about as we've been preparing for this was like, actually, the things that there are more things that we share in common than are different. But that means we mean not just me and Chris, but actually the wider world, like and men in general. But one of the things that me and Chris, and I'm hopefully optimistic that many of our listeners will also share, because it's been very fulfilling for me, it's been marriage.
Yes.
How long have you been married?
2021. So almost 4 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your tenure is longer than mine. I've been married. I'm looking at my watch for no reason at all. I've been married nearly a year.
Yeah.
It's not that long.
Do you know what? I'm just playing the math in my head just to make sure that is correct. Yeah, it is. Yeah. 2021.
And like, so then what I think is part of this conversation about masculinity and being a man, like there are certain expectations about marriage and relationship that are interesting to maybe get in and pick apart a little bit. And maybe this is actually where we begin, because I think if we begin actually with the very beginning, what was your perspective and perception of marriage when you were a kid? Because that'll be where it starts, right?
Yeah, I think exactly that. And my perception would be you've got to get married. Like, that's the thing. My parents were married quite early, certainly by today's standards. I think they got married at like 20, 21 or 22 or something like that. Which, if I think when I was 21 and 22, there couldn't have been anything further from my mind about other than getting married in my early 20s. But I guess that was just the damn thing back then, right? But I do distinctly remember thinking, as a teenager in particular, got to find a girlfriend, got to convince her to marry you, got to have multiple children, got to buy a house, got to do all of that sort of stuff because that's just what you do, right? What about, like, is that something similar for you?
Yeah, 100%. Like maybe slightly different. I grew up in a house, and my father's been married twice before he met my mother. So like the perception of, I guess, like what marriage is as a permanent fixture was maybe different. I grew up really aware that he'd had previous wives. Actually, one of them lived around the corner from us, and I have an elder brother and sister from my dad's first marriage, and like I would call them brother and sister. I lived with them, I grew up with them. So like there's a bit of maybe weirdness around like the sanctity of marriage, if you like, that goes with having that perspective on it. Like, equally though, it was much like you were saying, it was expected, like you're going to do it. It's on the cards. And actually, much like you said, I put it off for a very, very long time because of exactly that. I was just like, oh, why? I didn't get it. Why do I want to do it? This is stupid. Like,
Yeah.
I could just be in a relationship with someone and it's the same. Like, why spend thousands and thousands of pounds on a big party and a piece of paper that says it? What's the point?
Yeah, I mean, I was never particularly, well, until I saw the wedding bill, I was never particularly thinking about it from a cost perspective. Then I was like, why have we spent this much money on a wedding? But that's by the by. I do remember when I come to university in particular, so sort of 18, 19, 20, I'd had a few girlfriends here and there, but I also remember thinking, maybe this is very mature for my age, it's like I'm never going to settle. I'm never going to just find someone and marry them just because I think that's what needed to happen. And I guess my mindset had shifted from my early teens to my student years, in my late teens and early 20s. I don't know what shifted in me, but something shifted in me. I guess maybe my eyes were open to the wider world, perhaps, as being a student, being away from my family.
Well, if I might actually, I wonder if you had the same experience as me. There's a thing as a kid that you see all the relationships, like, so you've got your relationships in your life and the people you know, and then you've got the TV stuff, the media, and like the Disneyfication of love is how I thought about it. True love, and this it being this huge thing that, like, you've got a soulmate, something like that. And like I remember through my like late teens and 20s, I became just so cynical to that because I'm like, I just any of the feelings or relationships I'd had didn't look or feel anything like that. Yeah. And so the question wasn't like, I kind of went down the headspace of, well, if that doesn't exist, the rest of this stuff is bollocks and I don't need it.
Yeah.
Because like, it only really represents like this thing that I think is a fantasy and doesn't exist. Yeah. And I think that is that how you kind of had it?
Yeah, I guess so, because the world was just very different when I was able to break out of, break into my own world, my own kind of exploring life as a young man. It was different to what you grew up with. Maybe what was on the TV was different at that point. Social media was just kicking off, so that was obviously different. But I just felt free. I'd moved countries. I'd gone from Northern Ireland, where I grew up, brief stint in France, because that's where my parents moved and retired to then come into Brighton on my own as an 18-year-old young man and just ready to give it a go. And maybe there was something about that kind of, it was like a rebellion. I don't know, like a really rubbish rebellion where I'm like, I'm not going to fall into that marriage thing. But then equally, and I reflect back on this now, I really didn't have very many serious relationships. And I think a lot of that comes down to lots of different reasons. But one of them was like a trust thing for me. Like, not now, because my wife kind of changed all of those things, and we can perhaps get into that shortly. But certainly in my early to mid to even late 20s, I really struggled to let people see the core of who I am as a person.
Let them in, right?
I'd keep everyone at a distance. So if we'd go out to a club, for example, back in the club days, when you're cool and you're young and you're with it and all that stuff.
Yeah, I definitely was cool once. Sure.
I was absolutely the guy just standing on the edge. I would not go and chat to girls. I'd be terrified of rejection. I'd quite happily just be the wingman to everyone else. And I was kind of okay with that role. I was quite comfortable doing that. I was quite comfortable just doing my own thing. But then as life went on and I got older, and you start seeing your friends marry off or start having kids or into serious relationships, I then started thinking, all right, maybe I should revert back to what I thought was the normal thing to do and find a relationship with a real girl and see where it goes. But I really did not ever want to settle. I was quite prepared to be alone rather than being in a loveless or pointless relationship.
So interestingly, I did the exact opposite.
Interesting,
And this is going to be very honest here. I've had like 3 big relationships in my life, and like when you top them together, they're almost back to back. They're like, there's a bit of a gap in there somewhere, but like through uni. But these huge life affirming and like formative relationships that I've had with women, and 3 women, one of whom is now my wife, thankfully. But like what you were saying, so the first one was interesting. I was too young to understand what it was that I had, and I think when I look back on it now with the lens of where I have grown to, I wasn't mature enough to have a mature relationship that we were trying to have.
Yeah.
So that was a me thing, and I got that wrong and misunderstood. Not misunderstood it. I couldn't have understood it. I just wasn't in a good place in terms of actually how it's probably due to the level of masculinity that I was trying to exhibit and put out in the world. Like I didn't want to be a good partner. I wanted to do the things I wanted to do. Yeah. The second big relationship I had though was more challenging, and I definitely found myself in like a people pleaser, and it was comfortable. It was so comfortable, and there were reasons for its comfort, and like there's a sad story in there about family and whatever. And we were together for about 8 years all in. And when we called it at the end, it was such an anticlimax. And on reflection, I was like, the last 4 years we should have done this so much longer ago. And it was sad and it was hard, but at the same time, it then led me to this relationship, the one with my wife. And what you were saying actually before about like, what does the perfect relationship look like, or like, I still don't think true love is a thing, or soulmates or anything like that. But what I have found is what does that other person bring out in you that you like?
Yeah. How
does this relationship make me better? How does it challenge me?
Yeah.
Because if you ask it, me and Jess, we have our conversations, and they're not all plain sailing. I'm sure it's not with your wife, no. But there is a respect piece that goes in there. And actually, I want to talk about we'll talk about the actual difference of marriage and how that's changed. But it was always like, this is making me better. This is challenging the ways I think, and like actually challenging some really deep ways, I think, to make me better. And is it comfortable all the time? No. But am I happier because of it? Yes. And I think it became about that. Like, the relationship actually makes me fulfilled and happy, not easy.
Yeah, I like that. And it's kind of, when you're in a space of either previous experiences with relationships or life in general, and in my world of not letting people in, when I could see myself starting to bring my walls down, I thought there must be something special about my wife, because she's doing something to me or making me feel a certain type of comfortableness where I can do that. And that was never easy for me to do that for lots of different reasons. But I remember, because I met her when I was 30. I'm 37 at the point of recording this, right? We met through the traditional online dating app. It was traditional then. It wasn't traditional back when I was a student. You actually had to go out and speak to people.
Yeah.
Right? Then it was kind of, Tinder was a thing. We actually met through an app called Bumble.
I'm very familiar with Bumble.
Yeah, the girl's got to do the
I'm not. If my wife's listening, I'm not like.
You're only familiar with using it once with her.
Well, I also met my wife on Tinder. So right, we were both there.
Yeah, and because I was going back to I was always the guy standing around the edges. I never had the confidence or the motivation, I suppose, to go and chat girls up. I just wasn't very. I never had the gift of the gab. I was rubbish at it. But typing stuff on an app, I'm much better at typing things and expressing myself than I am talking.
Is it because you're afraid of saying the wrong thing?
Not necessarily afraid of spelling the wrong thing. I don't know. Well, maybe it is. I don't know. I just find it easier. I can say what I want to say. I don't know. Maybe I can say what I want to say at my own pace when I'm texting something or writing something down, rather than being caught off guard.
I think there's a fear of immediacy of feedback. So like,
possibly.
And I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but I've experienced this in my work life through sales, but also in my personal life. Like, there is a level of like, once you've sent it, you can't unsend it. So you're like, okay, it's done. I can't undo that. Whereas when you're saying something to someone, it's so fast when you're saying something to someone, it's so fast and it can be really transactional that like maybe there is I think there is a fear of saying the wrong thing and then the immediacy of the feedback, and then there's no undo, and you're stuck looking at the person who you've just said something really offensive or stupid or embarrassing to, and like that's a black hole that you cannot get out of. Whereas if you send it over text message and then they don't respond to you, like, well, that's that. Like, okay, well, we know now, right?
Yeah, maybe it is that. Yeah, I've never actually thought about it that way, but I do remember going to meet her for the first time, my now wife. We met at a pub not too far away from a flat that I'd owned in Brighton, and the only real conversation we'd had on Bumble was, and she often makes a joke about this, her chat game. Her opening line to me was, "Hey there." And I was like, there's something about that was quite simplistic that really lured me in. I was like, "Hey there." And then, I'm obviously being sarcastic here. Yeah. And then we just kind of got chatting, and within like a few messages, we'd exchanged phone numbers off Bumble, agreed to meet. And me and my wife have both reflected at the time, we'd both tried different ways of meeting different people, had been on a few dates which didn't work out. And we'd kind of both agreed that we were almost at the point of, we'll just give it one more try with this one last person and see if it works or not. And then if it doesn't work, we'll just take a break from it and come back to it in another few years, or it's not meant to be. And then we met, and the rest is history, as they say.
Have you? This is interesting because I've had like when you spoke to your wife or your what's her name? Sorry,
Grace.
Grace.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to talk. Just keep saying your wife.
Yeah,
like
Grace. Yeah.
When you met Grace, and when you started talking to her, did you discuss with her the different experiences that you had on the dating sites?
No, not immediately. I tell you, do you know I was 30 when I met her, right?
Yeah.
I think when you get to a certain age, you kind of know straight away what you're looking for, right? You kind of know, you don't want to play any games. You kind of get a vibe pretty quickly about whether you're going to vibe with this person. I distinctly remember she was 2 minutes late, first and foremost, and that's not good for me. So, and actually her reason was her dad had dropped her at the Sainsbury's up the road, and so it took a little bit longer to walk down. She didn't want to be seen with her dad dropping her off. I kind of respect
I get that. I
respect
that. Yeah, I get
but she was 2 minutes late. But anyway, we ordered some drinks at the bar straight away, went to sit down, and the first thing that she did was make an inappropriate comment, like a pretty dark, humoured comment, which immediately I was like, that's funny. Like, I like that. That's my type of comedy. And from there, we just went straight into literally hours of talking absolute bollocks to each other. I couldn't even tell you what the conversation was about. All I know is 4 hours later, we were still talking and laughing and all that sort of stuff. And there was if that first impression for me had been anything other than, I like that, I would have done the polite kind of thing and kind of carried the conversation on. But it wouldn't have been a meaningful conversation. It would have been a nicety type thing.
Yeah. What I actually meant was about actually her different experience on the platform, though. No, so the reason I again thinking about it through the lens of man, I remember I wasn't on it for very long. It didn't take long to meet Jess. I was very lucky. It was a very happenstanceful connection, I guess. And I went on a few dates before with other people and didn't really pan out or anything. But when I spoke to her about her experience of it, it could not have been more different particularly in terms of volume of connections.
Sure.
And I don't know, I couldn't want to speak to it in terms of why that is. I think we could probably all assume a variety of reasons about the difference in things that men and women are looking for on those sites, candidly.
Yeah.
But her description of it, I remember having I'm talking to 4 people or something. She was like, yeah, I've got 150.
Oh.
And she just was it's too many for me to respond to. I don't bother with it.
Impressive.
Well, she's fit, but I couldn't believe it. It was every single person I swipe right on has already swiped right on me. Every single one. And I'm like, that has not been that is so opposite to my experience of this platform comparatively.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't even know if we talked about it on the first day. I think we were so entrenched in just some ridiculous conversation.
Oh, we didn't talk about it at the beginning. It wasn't day one. It wasn't come on, show me.
Hey, show me. I do remember distinctly.
I want to see the DMs.
As well as being on Tinder and Bumble, I'd also paid for eHarmony.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is, I guess, a little bit more of the professional dating services.
It's like they're growing up plenty of fish.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you got to pay for it, and it comes with all these ridiculous psychometric style questions. And I do remember after a few dates showing my wife my profile, and she was like, what on earth have you written? You sound and look ridiculous. That's nothing like you. It's I know, but I was trying to portray myself as a modern professional human being on this site, but I probably wasn't being myself.
So when we talk again, the theme we're really talking about is like how we think about this through the lens of modern man.
Yeah.
And like I remember one of my first gambits with her is I did a quote from the TV show Archer. Have you ever seen that show?
No.
It's not like it's funny. It's a cartoon though.
Cartoon.
And like I felt it was like this is either going to land really well or like very very poorly, and she's going to think I'm a honking big nerd and never talk to me again. But equally, that's kind of like you either she'll figure it out one way or another.
Yeah,
She meets me, she's gonna know. I went down that road and it went really well. She responded with the appropriate quote, almost like a command word. And I was just like, yes, she gets it, man. And that was huge. But like I think maybe it's because she's a non-traditional. I would say she's in that sort of sphere as well. Not into football. Doesn't think about. Loves games actually. Not in very different games to me. But has a real appreciation for like play in the sense of like that is a thing I enjoy to do in my spare time, and I really and music as well. She loves music, so like we had a huge amount of crossover and all that sort of stuff. But it only came. I remember it was weird. It's almost like a vetting process because like you were saying, I knew what I wanted.
Yeah.
I knew the sort of relationship I wanted. I didn't know what I wanted it to change in me or where I wanted to go with it. But I think, and it only came through maturity. There is no coaching or life lessons or people telling me what it was that could have prepared me for that. Instead, I think it was just like, I know I am looking for someone who will make me better.
Yeah.
And make me happy, actually better and happy. And maybe those two things are connected.
Yeah, I think I remember my first date was on the Friday. We'd agreed to meet. It went so well. We'd agreed to meet up on the Sunday and go for a walk. She'd been to a wedding on the Saturday night. So turned up on the Sunday.
Little jaded?
Really hungover.
Yeah.
And we went on this massive walk around Devil's Dyke, which is like a big nature reserve in Brighton, down in Sussex. And I remember she was clearly hungover as tits, like sweating, was really struggling, had barely been to sleep, all that sort of stuff. But she turned up, we did this hike. She was like clambering to get back up the hill. And as I was walking up like in front, she was like, just leave me, I'll meet you at the top. As I was walking back up, I was like, actually, there's something about this girl and her vibe that makes me feel comfortable being me. And that was one of the things I really struggled with all the other dates I'd been on. I'd never really felt like I was able to present the true version of me. So I was a little bit nervous about how that might come across. To your point about, are they going to like the games that I play, the music that I'm into? For me, it's like, is she going to like the humour that I find funny, or the programs that I like watching, all that sort of stuff. And when we figured out on the first date, within a few hours of conversation, that was the most important thing for me, was she gets me for me, rather than me for trying to pretend that I'm someone like this modern perfect man. And that for me was the walls coming down. Yeah. And that's when I knew, and upon reflection and talking about it with her afterwards, she was like, when did you think you like loved me? And I was like, when I actually loved you was a few months in. When I thought I could love you was on that second date. There was something about it for me. I was just like, and that was a different feeling for me. After years of saying, I'll just be alone. If I can't find anyone I like, I'll just be alone. She made me feel more comfortable that could be a reality. And that was wild. I loved it.
That's so beautiful, man.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I want to talk about, because that's actually, I think this leads on really nicely to modern gender roles in a relationship as two married men.
Yeah.
And growing up thinking about what marriage was and being shown it through like the lens of Disneyfication, or like through the lens of your parents, and my parents were very traditional in that sense. Like there was an expectation I will be the breadwinner.
Yeah.
And that's the man's job. The man's job is to go to work. The woman's job is to stay home and look after the kids and do all that stuff. Now, my relationship with my wife is not that at all. You know, we both go to work. She'll tell you she has more money than me, but she works for a very successful business, has had a great career. You know, it's really important to her. That was actually one of the things I wanted from a relationship, with someone who would meet me with ambition. I had lots of things I want to do, and it's important that someone can kind of understand where you're coming from. But like, and maybe from your perspective, I don't know how your relationship dynamic works, but do you think has what you expected your gender role to be in your relationship ended up different?
Yes and no. So I guess just the actual practicalities of it. I'm in a job that pays better than she's getting paid, because she's a primary school teacher. So It's not that she's not staying at home baking bread all day. She's in a vocation, a proper career job. She doesn't pay as well as private sector jobs do because it's it's public sector, right?
Which I could do a whole podcast
Yeah.
about how that's bullshit. Because you're literally making the future better. But whatever,
I know.
we'll come back to that.
We'll do that on another time. But so she's got a career, but just by the nature of who gets paid more, I add more value in terms of money to it. But I don't see our relationship that way at all. I see us as absolute equals. And she tells me off sometimes when I'm being annoying. I tell her off sometimes when she's being annoying. And everything and when we talk about marriage in particular, one thing I had to come to terms with, we both had to come to terms with, and I think every marriage has to come to terms with, when you are married, the thing that's different, other than the commitment and everything else, is you're no longer one person. Everything is combined at that point, and that's a lovely thing. It's a lovely thing to say our lives are intertwined emotionally, lovingly, legally, financially, everything. So do I see these typical gender roles at play? Yeah, by happenstance, yes. But is that really what's happening? No, not at all. We are absolute equals in our relationships.
It's funny, we were talking about it the other day, and like I assumed, I was like, we're talking about maybe having kids, and like if we are so blessed, I'd be like, well, and you'd be the one who stays home. And she was like, why? I earn more money than you. I'm like, well, yeah, but I just assumed you'd do that. She's like, why would you assume that?
Yeah.
Like, that's not. And it had honestly, until a couple of weeks ago, it had never even popped into my head the idea that I could maybe even want to be a stay-at-home dad or any of that sort of stuff in the future. Like, it had never. Culturally, I was never encouraged in a sense to even think like that. Like, the thought of that is really cool. I can even go, like, you can go further with it around the surname thing. So my wife has a much more interesting surname than mine. My surname's Hewett. Sounds like an accountant. And I actually, upon reflection, I would have loved, and maybe I will do one day, to take my wife's name.
Yeah.
But my brain and the macho thing that's been baked into me so hard was like, you can't do it. You cannot take your wife's surname. So we ended up both keeping our surnames. Like, we've decided to go, and like legally, those are the names that we have. We've talked about what maybe happens if kids show up or whatever, and I think there's an acceptance that society will view the kids with my surname even if we gave them hers. So we've decided it would be mine for now. Maybe that will change when we get there, but like. There's a practical thing about that, and cultural. It will be much. If we gave them, and this is maybe part of the problem, right, of the gender roles thing. If we want to both keep our identities and surnames in that sense, and theoretically you'd want to give the kids the mother's name because it makes sense in a sense that she made them, baked them, if you like, but like went through the process of carrying them and give birth to them. If you give the child the woman's surname in that situation, everyone's going to assume you're divorced.
Yeah, I can see that.
And I know, it's not even like, I guess, like, I know people who have done that and have struggled with that. You struggle with picking your kids up because you don't share their surname, like dad.
Yeah.
Whereas the mum doesn't. It's less challenging for the woman who has a different surname to their child.
Yeah, I honestly hadn't thought about this. The conversation me and my wife had about our surnames was a pretty simple one. Her maiden name is Thomas, and she has a brother called Chris. So it could not be possible for me to take her surname because I'd have the same name as her brother, which...
No, hard pass.
Bit weird.
Hard pass.
Not going to happen.
Yeah.
But I do also remember thinking, I'm the last boy Britton in my family, and I do have a little bit of the Henry VIII about me and thinking, who's going to carry on the name? Which is ridiculous, by the way.
Isn't it? So this is part of it, right? This is part of the like macho idealism that we have around relationships, is that it's important for the man to carry on the man's name.
Yeah.
Like,
so stupid. It really is so. When you talk about it out loud, you're like, that's really stupid.
Well, it's also because you've got like, maybe it's to do with how the family is perceived in society. Because like, do people call you the Brittons?
Yeah.
Yeah. So no one calls us the Hewitts because we've named ourselves differently.
Yeah.
It doesn't work, right? But there's an interesting, like, I don't know. It's like you're saying about the linked thing. We still get posts to the Hewitts, which is everyone assumes she took my name. It's not, but it's been a very interesting kind of endeavour to go down about how people perceive that and why you've done it.
Yeah, but. The whole point about the kid thing, I think, is the surname of the child is really interesting because that was a point my wife had raised. But she loves her family's surname, right? So her family's very
Thomas, right?
Yeah, her family very close, and it's kind of it's a deep and meaningful thing to that family. Great, and obviously Chris Thomas was out of the window because that couldn't happen. But she was very open and honest about saying, I want our child and us to have the same surnames. That was something that was important to her, because I guess it is. But I never really thought about it, if we didn't have the same surnames, what that might cause in terms of
the technical implication.
Yeah,
Not even the
wild.
stigma. Like, just the world is so geared.
Just picking someone up from school or a doctor's appointment or something like that. I never even thought
going
about
on a
it.
plane with them. Like,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
do you know what I mean? Like, it's actually, when you actually, we talked about it a lot because we both feel very passionately. I feel really strongly about it because of stupid, I say stupid, but like inbuilt systems in my brain that say it must be this way.
Yeah.
Like, the thought of me becoming Ted Hopcraft was way too complex.
Yeah.
Never even entered into my sphere of opportunity, and like, I only know. I'll tell you why. Actually, I'll tell you the real story. I won't say his name in case he listens to it. I used to work with a guy at British Gas who he changed his name to his wife's surname when he worked there, and he was a salesperson, and my God, he got some shit for it. Like, they started calling him he changed his name, his surname became Martin, and he just got known as Mrs. Martin in the office.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And like, everyone's funny and ha 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 ha, but like, on reflection, I was like, that was mean.
That's just cruel.
That was
yeah.
like, these are 30, 40-year-old men who are picking on this dude who's, I think, done something pretty progressive, and like, he didn't have a bad surname before or anything. It's just like they made the decision to go with his wife's one, and all he got was abuse. No one sat there and went, "That was cool, man." Like, and I think that actually is hugely influenced that conversation with me, that one experience, and seeing this guy has put himself up in some capacity and has said, "You know what? I want to do something non-traditional gender-wise with my surname when I get married," and he paid the price for it in a really bad way. I felt awful for him.
There you go. That's what happens when you try to be modern, right? Sometimes. What's your obviously being married now? Has anything changed for you guys? Do you see anything different in your relationship?
There's a permanence to it that gives me trust and safety, actually, and also fear. I feel like it, like you were saying, this single unit thing. I even when we disagree and fall out, I am not so worried about our relationship breaking down, because I know it is there. There is an underlying thing, and I think it's like, I was saying before, I don't believe in like true love and soulmates and all that. Love is a thing you grow. It is not, in my opinion. I think it is something that happens over a long time, and like, you love someone in a lot of different ways. It's not just like, I forget the models and stuff. I've seen different cultural variances of it, of the different types of love. I know there's been, like, the Greeks obviously did it a long time ago. All the paternal love and fraternal love and all that sort of romantic love. All that stuff is different. But I found that with the relationship that like this, where it's it's for a long time and hopefully forever, that because of the permanence of it, and because of the legality of it, and like all that sort of stuff, your trust that it's there is constant now, rather than like, oh my God, we've had a huge row and like she's gonna walk out and like, oh my God, I'm gonna be alone again. Like, I don't have that fear anymore. I think that's been probably the big shift.
Yeah, because what a hassle divorce is, right?
Well, you ask me dad, he'll tell you. Like, it's cost him a lot of money.
Yeah, I bet it has. Crikey. I think for me, like, I've got a lot of friends who've often said, why do you need to get married? Like, you can just be together and just love each other. Why do you need to spend money on a wedding? And why do you need a bit of paper to validate your love? And for me, it wasn't anything to do with that at all. The wedding was great. The party was great. Having everyone celebrating you and your relationship, amazing, right? A really nice thing to do. And the memories are amazing as well. For me, it's not about the legalities. There's something deep and meaningful about kind of saying you belong to this person.
Yeah.
And
Tribe creation.
Yeah, and I don't mean that in a creepy way, like she belongs to me and I belong to her. But it's kind of like, we both agree that out of the 7 or 8 billion people in this world, us two have found each other, and we both agree that we are the right people to spend the rest of our lives together with. There's something really kind of connected about that, which I think, of course, you can get it without the marriage, but the taking it a step further and legally saying it, there was something really cool about that, which I was all out for, and thankfully she was as well.
I love that. I was going to ask you, actually, we're nearly at the end of time anyway. I guess like final thoughts about maybe marriage and being a man. Let me start that again, sorry. My final thoughts maybe on like marriage and being a man. I think I can see it's just changed. I'll give you one more like little anecdote of mine, and maybe that'll help frame how I think about it. When me and my wife were talking about our actual wedding day, one of the biggest problems that we had with it was to do with the ritual of the actual ceremony. She's got a father and a stepfather who she's really close with, both of them. So she's like, who's going to walk me down the aisle? And when we talked about it, she was like, well, when you think about what that is, when you think about that process, it's one man walking a woman down an aisle and giving her to another man. I transfer my proprietary ownership from one man to another. And we both felt really uncomfortable about this when you pick that apart, because it's like, I don't love that. I don't really want my father-in-law to give me my wife. Like, that's kind of weird. So we talked about it, and we walked each other down the aisle instead.
Oh, wow, okay.
So we came, and I say down the aisle, it was a set of stairs and down the thing. I remember talking to my family about this, and they were all like, you sure? Like, that's really outside of the norm. But actually, when we talked to like the registrar and the venue, they were like, yeah, that's amazing, do that. And I don't know whether it's like necessarily a sign of the times, but I think it's just more of it signals a change in thinking, both from me, but also like the fact that it's even possible. Like, you don't have to just go with all of these things and like you don't have to be the guy in the relationship in that sense. You know, you don't have to be the breadwinner. You don't have to be the strong one. You don't have to be the anchor for the whole thing. Like, it's a team game. Yeah. And the two, I actually really liked it. It felt very symbolic to me about the fact that like you were saying, like, we are equals, we are partners in this together, and like we're going to begin this journey together, and hopefully we'll finish the journey together too. And maybe that's the big shift, is that maybe that way of thinking is even possible today.
Definitely, and we made the decision to not, like I say, we going back to the whole who's in charge in the relationship bit. I kind of forced the decision about not getting married in the church. So I'm not religious. She's Catholic. She's fairly religious. She wanted to get married in the church, traditional wedding. I was like, that's not going to mean anything to me. I'm willing to give on lots of different things, but giving myself over and joining us as a connection in the eyes of God won't mean anything to me. So I can't do it. And thankfully we come to this compromise, and she agreed, and we got married in a big old fancy bar, that sort of stuff. But we did the legal bits, saying the actual legal words in a registry office a few days before.
Yep.
And the reason we did that is because that then gives you so much more freedom with a celebrant to put whatever spin you want to put on the wedding. And we did exactly that. Instead of having just a best man, I had a best mum, so I had my mum up there with me. And we had our own lighting of candle ceremonies. We had lots of poems being read out, readings. The celebrant was able to do different things that you couldn't do with just a registrar. And we made the whole thing quite celebratory of our relationships and who we are as people. What we both agreed we didn't want was a traditional style wedding, where it's exactly how you described it. There was elements of that, but actually that's our day. That's our day to express to everyone who's there and to ourselves, this is who we are as people. So yeah, out with the tradition. Do what you want to do, man.
Make your own traditions, right? That becomes your rituals, customs, habits, whatever you want to call them.
Exactly, 100%. Love that.